Donald Trump cannot stop talking negatively about his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Now, it all started with the New York Times interview where he was clear and transparent about the fact that he wouldn't have worked with Jeff Sessions if he knew that he was going to recuse himself in regard to the investigation into Russian collusion. And now he put out a statement during a press conference. So we have that, and then later on, I'll tell you what he told the Wall Street Journal about Sessions. It just keeps going on and on. Take a look.
I am disappointed in the Attorney General. He should not have recused himself almost immediately after he took office. And if he was going to recuse himself, he should have told me prior to taking office, and I would have quite simply picked somebody else. So I think that's a bad thing, not for the president, but for the presidency. I think it's unfair to the presidency. I want the Attorney General to be much tougher on the leaks from intelligence agencies, which are leaking like rarely have they ever leaked before at a very important level. I told you before, I'm very disappointed with the Attorney General, but we will see what happens. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Keep in mind that Jeff Sessions has not said anything in response to these statements, at least not yet. When he was questioned about this, days ago, he said, I love my job, I'm gonna stay right where I'm at. But it might not be up to you, Jeff Sessions. It seems like Trump is kind of building a case against you, and he's also making it incredibly clear that he's guilty of something. Not Jeff Sessions, but Donald Trump.
Yeah, so look, we'll get into all the details in a sec, but this is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I've been covering politics for over 20 years now, and a president coming out and saying that his own Attorney General is beleaguered? That was a day ago and that was shocking. Now it's gotten way, way worse. Can you imagine Obama or even George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush or Reagan coming out and going, my goddamn Attorney General? Can you believe him? What? That's saying that he is troubled by him, he's weak, and he's considering firing him. Unprecedented, unheard of. He's not Obama or Hillary Clinton's Attorney General, he's your Attorney General. And this guy's constantly demanding loyalty like a mafia boss, right?
That's exactly right.
But the thing is, Jeff Sessions was loyal to him. He was one of the first senators to endorse Donald Trump when nobody else was doing it. He stuck his neck out for Donald Trump. Do you think Trump cares? There's only one thing Donald Trump cares about, himself.
The mistake that Sessions is making is that he is treating this administration as if it's like any other administration from the past. This is not, this is an unprecedented administration. And so, Jeff Sessions recusing himself was the right thing to do, considering the fact that he had those meetings with the Russian ambassador, and he didn't disclose it during his confirmation hearings. He did the right thing in that case. But Trump doesn't care about whether or not you do the right thing. Trump cares about whether or not you are looking out for him, his best interests, and covering up his lies and possible collusion. And so, yeah.
Yeah, just one more thing, guys. The Republicans are making the mistake of thinking that Donald Trump didn't do a deal with the Russians. So Sessions thinks, what's the big deal? I recuse myself because otherwise I'd be in a lot of trouble for an obvious conflict of interest when I did meet with the Russians, so I shouldn't be involved in this case. Well, the big deal, Jeff, is that your boss did a corrupt deal with the Russians, and so he wanted you to cover it up. And so that's what you're not getting. So, and I look, I'm not one to be overly considerate of the Republicans and have a lot of positive views of them. But I actually think that a lot of them are genuinely think that, oh, I don't understand why Trump's so upset. What's the big deal? Why don't we just do the investigation and do normal things like recuse ourselves if we have a conflict? Because he did it, you schmucks. He did it and he knows it. Now the whole country knows it. Look at this. Why in the world would he attack Jeff Sessions that he has no other beef with? But he just told you, it was on tape, go back and rewind it. He said, why did he recuse himself? Why do you care that if you didn't do anything wrong in Russia, why do you care that your Attorney General isn't part of the decision making on who's investigating you? If you said to me, Cenk, there's an investigation of what you did in Indonesia, I'm like, All right, have at it, Hoss. I didn't do anything in Indonesia. And if Anna said, well, I know Jake too well, we co-host the show, I'm going to recuse myself. Like, that's fine. Why would I care? I wouldn't go, if I said all of a sudden out of nowhere, why did Anna recuse herself from that investigation? I need her in that investigation. I need her to, you say, wait a minute.
Right, and especially if you wouldn't drop it. Like if this is now, how many times has he released negative statements about Jeff Sessions? It's multiple times, multiple different outlets. So first time was with the New York Times. Of course, that caused a splash in the headlines. Then he proceeded to tweet. I'll get those tweets for you in just a second. Then there was this press conference. And then there was an interview that he did with the Wall Street Journal. And I think this is extremely telling. So Jeff Sessions, as Cenk mentioned, has been very loyal to Donald Trump. In fact, he was one of the first officials to come out in support of Donald Trump and endorse him. And so Donald Trump was asked about that by a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. And here's what his answer to that is. When they say he endorsed me, I went to Alabama. I had 40,000 people. He was a senator from Alabama. I won the state by a lot, massive numbers. A lot of the states I won by massive numbers. But he was a senator. He looks at 40,000 people and he probably says, what do I have to lose? And he endorsed me. So it's not like a great loyal thing about the endorsement, but I'm very disappointed in Jeff Sessions. Wow.
So you are loyal to Donald Trump at your peril. Look at what he did to Chris Christie, humiliated him and threw him away. Rudy Giuliani, oh, I thank you for supporting me, wonderful. Rudy, I've known him for all these years, garbage can. Newt Gingrich, all stuck his neck out, supported him with the Republican establishment, garbage can. Okay, so now Jeff Sessions, I think he was the first senator to come out and support Donald Trump. Who cares? You have no use left for me. Okay, I have no use for you. All I do is use people up. Now, those of you who are loyal voters and supporters of him, do you think he's going to repay that loyalty after what he just did to Jeff Sessions and all those other guys? No, he never cared about Jeff Sessions. He never cared about any of you. All he cares about is himself. And he doesn't look at Jeff. Look, Jeff Sessions, in my opinion, a bad guy in 100 other ways, right? So we talked about how he wants to go after pot and all the racial things in the past, etc. So I'm not a fan of Jeff Sessions. But was he loyal to Donald Trump? Absolutely. He risked his career for Donald Trump. And now what does Donald Trump do him? Hey, listen, man, the whole point of hiring you was to cover up my criminal activities. If you're not going to commit crimes for me, I have no use for you anymore. Then you're not sufficiently loyal.
So let's get to Trump's tweets, which he put out into the universe at 3 in the morning today.
The guy's got, look at 3:03 a.m. What are you doing? Now, this guy, he doesn't get any sleep. He's lost his mind. This guy's a lunatic. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, so he tweets out, Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump campaign, quietly working to boost Clinton. So where is the investigation attorney general? Okay, first of all, there's so many things. And then of course, he includes Sean Hannity in that tweet, essentially playing the role of executive producer of Sean Hannity's show and tipping him off to that tweet and to a potential topic, I guess, that he could talk about on his program.
Okay, hold for one more second. Who the hell is Hillary Clinton?
Yeah.
Which government position does she hold, or will she ever hold? She's totally irrelevant. I mean, partly thanks to you, she's in the dustbin of history. Why are we talking about Hillary Clinton?
About the Ukrainian effort to boost Hillary Clinton?
What are you talking about? Jason Chaffetz, that he ran away from Congress so he wouldn't have to deal with Trump investigating Trump, because he was in charge in the House of having to investigate Trump. He knows Trump is crooked, so he literally quit his job so he wouldn't have to investigate Trump and then lose himself some Republican voters who love Trump no matter how corrupt he is. Goes on Fox and Friends, and yesterday talking about how we should investigate Chelsea Clinton. And maybe we should investigate Jimmy Carter's brother, and these people don't have government positions to investigate Hillary Clinton. It's such an obvious distraction. Yeah. He did it. He's telling you he did it.
It's a very weak attempt at a distraction. And if anything, it's another red flag indicating that there was wrongdoing on Trump's behalf, and he's doing everything he can to try to manipulate the conversation and the narrative. He also tweeted that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has taken a very weak position on Hillary Clinton crimes. where are emails in DNC server and Intel leakers? It's interesting because if you can remember when Trump was campaigning, lock her up was one of the chants at the RNC. And then he gets elected and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna leave Hillary Clinton alone. Let her be, let her be. Okay, so do you want to let her be or do you want to investigate her? And besides which, investigating her makes absolutely no sense in this context. You are the president. You are the one who's accused of wrongdoing. You are the person who should be investigated.
Well, to be fair, I really want to get back into Grover Cleveland and James Polk's administrations. I mean, was he really James Polk the dark horse? I don't know. And Stewart's folly, it's got folly in the title. Why aren't we investigating that? I think we should go back and figure out exactly what John Quincy Adams did.
And finally, yesterday, Trump had tweeted that Sessions was beleaguered in his role as Attorney General. So he's making it pretty clear that he's paving the way for Sessions to get fired. And there were officials within the White House who spoke to the press and indicated that Trump had asked, what happens if I fire Jeff Sessions? And someone advised him, you might want to save that bullet for Robert Mueller.
Oh, wow, great.
Yeah.
By the way, he also went after McCabe. Let me give you one last tweet from in the middle of the night. Problem is that acting head of the FBI and the person in charge of the Hillary investigation, Andrew McCabe, got $700,000 from Hillary for her wife. Now, gee, I wonder why he's going after everyone who's in law enforcement. He's going after the Attorney General, the head of the FBI, and the special prosecutor, and by the way, also the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, okay? So I thought you were for law and order. I thought you were for rule of law. I thought you were for the cops. We're gonna get so tough on them. We're gonna be so tough on them, right? Oh, when they actually are investigating your criminal activities, all of a sudden you hate the FBI, you hate the Justice Department, you hate all this, oh, they weren't loyal to me. They should have been loyal to me. You go after the other guys, you cover up my crimes. Are you really this dense now and you still think he didn't do it? Have you ever seen a guy in this much panic over being investigated? Help us build independent media. Become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.